This week's Coach's Corner podcast is brought to you by CodyRourke18.com and iHeartRadio. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at CodyRourke NFL. Tweet me, direct message me with the latest news, analysis, your thoughts. Give me your feedback on what we talk about on the show. If you have interest of being on the show, reach out to us on there and we'll get you on. We're going to make it happen. Bring your knowledge of sports to the table on the podcast. Get it delivered right here as well. So on this week's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast, I'm joined by Gladiators defensive backs Deshaunte Weber and Greg Lawson, two pivotal leaders of the defense and my defensive backfield that I coach for the Grand Junction Gladiators. I'm glad to have them in studio today. We're going to talk about their mindset, their preparation, the upcoming playoffs. Obviously, Gladiators clinching the number one seed this past weekend with a 32-0 victory on the road against the Rocky Mountain SaberCats. I have them join me in studio to talk about that and their outlook and who they like to play in the playoffs in the first round or at all. We're going to talk about that and much more with them. Also, Chad Ochocinco is back in the NFL, but for what reason? Is it playing? You'll find out in just a few moments. Draymond Green arrested over the weekend in Michigan at a restaurant over an alleged assault allegation by a Michigan State defensive back. What is the NBA going to do about that? Is he going to be fined? Is there going to be discipline? We're going to talk about that and much more. Look into the situation as well. And the Denver Broncos and Von Miller, the clock is ticking for them to make a deal on a contract extension. They have until the 15th. They have just a few days until they need to come to an agreement on a deal, or else Von Miller will have to play on the franchise tag, and he's come out and he said that he won't play. So will Von Miller be a Denver Bronco for the next 5 to 6 years? Will they get a deal done? We will find out. We're going to analyze the whole situation as the clock winds down on this week's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast. This is the Coach's Corner podcast, brought to you by CodyRourke18.com. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast, and what a show we've got in store for you. UFC 200 just concluded over the weekend in what was supposed to be one of the most amazing fight cards that the UFC has ever come up with. However, with John Bones Jones over the weekend testing positive for a banned substance by the doping agency, he was removed from the match, and they had to find a replacement to fight Daniel Cormier, and it ended up being Anderson Silva, who was completely underweight compared to Cormier and whatnot. We're going to talk about that fight in just a moment. But, also in the news of the UFC, they just sold the company, Dana White and the Fertitta brothers. They sold the company of the UFC for $4 billion. They first purchased it for $2 million about 15 years ago and sold it for $4 billion, not 14. They sold it for $4 billion to the IMG company, obviously by Ari Emanuel, a key guy who is the basis of the Ari Gold character in the TV series and movie show Entourage. Him and his company buddies, they bought it. They bought the UFC, and Dana White's remaining as the president of the UFC, and they're excited where the company's going to lead, down the road in the future. So on that note, UFC 200, we're going to go through a quick rundown. Travis Brown fell mightily to Cain Velasquez, and I was having a discussion with somebody. Cain Velasquez is one of the most dominant fighters in the UFC when he is healthy. He's dismantled Brock Lesnar. He eventually ended Brock Lesnar's MMA career for about 5 years until Lesnar made his return this past week, and we're going to talk about that fight. But Cain Velasquez absolutely destroyed Ronda Rousey's boyfriend, and it was bad. Cain Velasquez dominated him and won by TKO, so Velasquez moves up, and what I think could eventually Velasquez versus Lesnar once again, maybe down the road. We'll see. We're going to talk about that. But first, in terms of Brock Lesnar, he made his return this weekend to the MMA, to the UFC, after 5 years of not fighting, and he took on a tough opponent in Mark Hunt, who's ranked number 5th in the heavyweight rankings. Mark Hunt, who's won his last few fights by knockout, he took on Brock Lesnar, and I can tell you what, I didn't expect Brock Lesnar to come into the UFC 200 and look the way he did. You know, Brock Lesnar is a WWE wrestler as well, and he did not look in the WWE as lean and as muscular and defined and toned as he was at UFC 200. He looked like a completely different animal. Brock Lesnar made his return to the octagon, and he beat Mark Hunt by unanimous decision, and it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable to see. You know, Lesnar took control. He slammed Mark Hunt on the ground, got him in the ground and pound, landed some punches, and completely controlled the match with his strength. And it was very surprising. You know, Mark Hunt is a legend in the UFC. He's a great fighter. To see Brock Lesnar perform the way he did after not fighting in the UFC for the last 5 years is unbelievable. And major props to him. He looks absolutely amazing, physique-wise, strong-wise, and he looked good in the ring. So it's good to see him back in the octagon. He's set to return back to the WWE next month at SummerSlam to take on Randy Orton. I don't know if Brock Lesnar will remain in the WWE for much longer, depending on how his fight really went. I think he belongs in the UFC. I think that's his true sport. I do believe that Brock Lesnar used his size and his strength in his first 6 fights in the UFC in order to try to prove a point, and he got caught. He got beat by a couple of guys because of it. I think he's a lot smarter now. I think he trains a lot better. He's got a better team around him. I think he can truly come back and really be a star in the UFC. You know, who really needs it. Obviously, with John Bones Jones' latest doping scandal being removed, that takes a big name out of the UFC. You know, Daniel Cormier really isn't a big name right now. A lot of criticism for how he fought against Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva's getting older. You got a lot of these older guys checking out. You got Conor McGregor still, but you need some more star power. And so when you look at it, Brock Lesnar is the perfect guy for Dana White to market, to bring back. So with that, I really hope Brock Lesnar really decides to come back and put all of his effort into the UFC and not between the UFC and the WWE. But we've seen this weird thing where Dana White's actually allowed a crossover. He allowed Ronda Rousey to appear at WrestleMania a couple years ago. You could see her in the WWE at one point. You can see a lot of different stuff there. So I'd rather see Brock Lesnar fight in the UFC. I think he belongs there, and he showed that this past weekend at UFC 200. Also, Frankie Edgar lost to Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo looked like he had a very good training camp in preparation for Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar runs his mouth a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that Frankie Edgar is one of the most overrated fighters in the UFC. You know, and now it's just a big setup to see who fights Conor McGregor for the featherweight title next. You know, but Conor McGregor's next fight's against Nate Diaz. We're going to hype that up. That's going to be a big fight. We're going to hype up in the next couple of weeks. That's coming up August 20th, UFC 202, Diaz versus McGregor, the second battle between these guys. I'm looking forward to it. The press conferences have already happened. It's bound to be a good fight. So, you know, you got to look at all the other things. So Jose Aldo came in, and he completely toyed with Frankie Edgar. Didn't really get to the ground much. Edgar tried attacking him, and, you know, Jose Aldo, he's quick. He's a fast fighter. He's bouncing around around the octagon. He was landing shots. He landed some powerful shots. He was good in his defense against the takedowns that Edgar tried to throw at him, and he controlled the fight, and he won by unanimous decision easily. So now he's the interim featherweight champion. The winner will eventually have to face Conor McGregor maybe here in 2 or 3 months. We'll have to see. I can imagine that playing out as well. So also, you know, title loss is something that wasn't on the UFC 200 card. You had Eddie Alvarez beating Rafael Dos Anjos for the light heavyweight championship. It is unbelievable to see that Rafael Dos Anjos, through the campaign of going up against Conor McGregor, pulling out of the fight due to an injury. Something we've seen quite often with McGregor's opponents, them pulling out of fights. He came into that fight and he got absolutely dominated by Eddie Alvarez, who's the new champion, and Alvarez went on to talk smack about Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, saying that they make more money and they don't deserve it, that the real superstars are, you know, him and some of the other guys, but you got these guys that are featherweights making more money, this and that. But I'm telling you what, Eddie Alvarez is not entertaining. Conor McGregor backs up his talk with his mouth. He runs his mouth, but he makes it entertaining and he backs it up, so you can't really ask for more than that at that point from the guy like that. So, looking forward to Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, too, and then whoever wins that, you know, Conor's going to go on and face probably Jose Aldo after that, a couple months from now. We'll have to see. But on that note, also some other fights around there as well. Amanda Nunes shocking the world and dominating Miesha Tate, bloodied her in the first round and made her tap out with a rear naked choke. So that's 3 new champions in a row. We had Ronda Rousey as the champion who fell to Holly Holm in shocking fashion. And then you had Miesha Tate beat Holly Holm at UFC 196 by submission in the last round. And that was a shocking defeat as well. And then now you got Amanda Nunes, who came in and completely destroyed Miesha Tate. And now you got to wonder, who's next? Who's Amanda Nunes going to fight next? Is it going to be Ronda Rousey? That just goes to be seen. We haven't heard much. Ronda Rousey recovering from knee surgery as well, so we don't know when she'll return, probably towards the New Year's. But when you look at it on paper, obviously the women's, the bantamweight division, you have Ronda Rousey, who's pretty much dominated that whole division, fell against Holly Holm, and a lot of people at that point were like, oh, wow, it was shocking. It was very shocked. I was one of those shocked guys. I loved watching Ronda Rousey. I thought she was very dominant. To see her fall the way she did, I've learned one thing over watching the UFC this past year is that, any fighter can go down at any moment. It doesn't matter who they're facing. They can be shocked no matter how unstoppable they've looked before. And so that's something I've taken into account. So let's talk about the Daniel Cormier Anderson Silva fight. Silva stepping in for John Bones Jones, who was removed from the match. Obviously a disappointing thing. Everyone was looking forward to John Bones Jones versus Cormier, the second fight between the two guys. Didn't happen. John Bones Jones is out, so Anderson Silva stepped in, was underweight compared to Daniel Cormier, but he took the fight anyways. And realistically, the fight I can sum up about Daniel Cormier Anderson Silva was Daniel Cormier pretty much laying on top of Anderson Silva the entire fight, winning by unanimous decision. One thing I'm really not liking seeing Anderson Silva at the age that he's at is that it just feels like he's become a punching bag for a lot of these younger guys in the UFC. I did think he got robbed against Michael Bisping back over there in the UK when they fought a couple months ago. I thought he got robbed there. It looked like he knocked him out. At one point, he even landed a double knee shot and dropped him. But they ended up giving it to Bisping by unanimous decision. So wasn't too happy about that. I just want Anderson Silva to retire going out on top, maybe get him one more good fight, a fight against an opponent he can match up with, and if he wins it, just go Anderson Silva, a guy is a legend in the UFC. Everybody has so much respect for him and a lot of respect as well for him coming up and stepping up and fighting in just 2 days' notice, which is hard for any fighter to do at that point. So, Daniel Cormier has faced a lot of criticism and backlash for his tactics and how he fought against Anderson Silva, laying on top of him pretty much the entire fight, winning it. A lot of guys didn't take that lightly. They didn't develop a lot of respect for him. It wasn't really a championship effort on his part. And Donald Cerrone came out with some controversial statements calling him a homophobic slur for the way he fought. So he's facing a lot of backlash for that as well. So UFC 200 proved to be pretty interesting. You know what? UFC 201 is coming up, but the card on UFC 202 is the one we're looking forward to the most. McGregor Diaz, number 2. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to talk NFL and the Denver Broncos negotiations with Von Miller in just a moment. The Coach's Corner podcast is brought to you by CodyWork18.com, and the show is now on iHeartRadio. Download the iHeartRadio app and search for the Coach's Corner podcast with Cody Rourke to listen to past, present, and future episodes of the show. One show I've really been interested in lately on television is a TV show called Animal Kingdom. It's about this family, a crime family that, plots jobs. They got a great cast. Scott Speedman is one of the major lead actors, but it's a very good show. If you ever liked a TV show on TNT called Southland, you're going to love this show. Check it out and tune into Animal Kingdom every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. It's a phenomenal show. I suggest you go back on demand and check it out. And speaking of television shows, we've got the ESPYs tonight at 7 o'clock p.m. going on. Craig Sager being honored for the Jimmy V Perseverance Award, and the high school football player that was shot and killed, shielding himself to shield 3 girls from bullets, passed away. He's going to receive the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. And this year's ESPYs appears to be a lot more honorable than last year's, people who demonstrated true courage, being this high school football player that lost his life, and also Craig Sager, very, very deserving guy for the award. And also, best performance, best championship performance. Von Miller is nominated in the category for an ESPY for best championship performance. Obviously, the 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a Super Bowl MVP has got him in the list for that. So go and vote. Voting ends tonight. Go vote for Von Miller, and the results will be announced tonight on the ESPYs. Also, the Denver Broncos are up for best team in the ESPYs, so go vote for them as well if you're a Denver Broncos fan. Also, coming back to television this upcoming weekend is Ballers, the HBO television show starring The Rock. He's a financial manager, sports agent in the show. Season 1 was spectacular. Reminded me a lot of Entourage, but more so aimed in the line of sports. So I'm very excited about the return of that and see what this season has in store. So check out those shows. Animal Kingdom on TNT, the ESPYs tonight, and also Ballers on HBO this Sunday. They make their return to primetime television. So, speaking of the Denver Broncos and Von Miller, they're just days away, and when I say days away, I mean 2 days away from having a deal done, or the need to have a deal done in order to keep Von Miller as a Denver Bronco over the next 5 to 6 years. That would make him the highest paid defensive player in the league, with over $60 million guaranteed over the next 3 years. John Elway and him have been exchanging contract proposals over the weekend. So, Chris Harris Jr., one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the National Football League, was on NFL Total Access on Tuesday night talking about it, and he really expressed that he really thinks a deal between Von Miller and the Denver Broncos will be done either Thursday night or Friday morning at the earliest. They have to get a deal done by Friday afternoon, or else Von Miller will have to play the entire season on the franchise tag, in which he's already come out and said he will not play on the franchise tag at all. He will sit all year if it has to. He doesn't lose money. He makes all that money guaranteed. I believe it's $14.3 million for the franchise tag, but then he's a free agent and can sign with anybody for a multi-year deal. Denver, if they know what's good for them, will not let him go. That would be one of the worst ideas in Denver Broncos history, is letting a guy of this caliber go. Von Miller, his production speaks for itself. I've spoke on it many times on the show. Over 4.5 years in his career, I say 4.5 because he tore his ACL and missed a portion of a season. A few years back, has over 60 sacks in just 4.5 years. Super Bowl MVP. His performance in the 2016 playoffs were unbelievable. His games against Tom Brady and Cam Newton, both the NFL Network's number 1 and number 2 top players of the NFL last season. He dismantled them both. So I think his performance speaks for itself. Von Miller deserves this money, and a lot of guys know that. There was some controversy. Someone tried stirring the pot, tried twisting a Derek Wolfe comment, where Derek Wolfe came out and said, guys should be willing to take pay cuts if they want to win championships. If you want to get paid, go to a team that won't win a championship. And Derek Wolfe speaks from experience. Derek Wolfe took a significantly larger pay cut to stay with the Denver Broncos over the course of the next 4 years, because he truly believes in that the Denver Broncos defense can be great for many years, and then they can contend for championships over the next course of the next 10 years. So Derek Wolfe signed for less to stay. Malik Jackson left the Denver Broncos to get more money and will probably not win a championship with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Von Miller and the Denver Broncos need to get this deal done as soon as possible in the next couple of days. If he doesn't, I'm really going to be worried as a Denver Broncos fan. My analyst hat aside, you got to look at it, and for the Denver Broncos, if he ends up not playing in the 2016-17 season, that's going to be very, very big for them. But you got guys like Shane Ray, Shaquille Barrett, who could step up in his absence if he were to do that. So let's hope it doesn't have to come to that. Let's hope Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, Shane Ray, Shaquille Barrett, they can tear up the edge this year on opposing NFL quarterbacks. So in other NFL news, obviously I mentioned earlier that Chad Ochocinco is back in the NFL for an NFL team. Not as a player, but as an assistant coach. Chad Ochocinco utilized his heavy and very influential Twitter fan base to ask Hugh Jackson, head coach of the Cleveland Browns, for a job by coming out and saying he'd love to coach. He'd love to go out there and help these receivers with their route running. So, after maybe 5 hours after he tweeted that, he announced that Hugh Jackson called him and that he's now an assistant coach, wide receivers, for the Cleveland Browns. And one thing I can attest to Chad Ochocinco, Chad Johnson, his real name, is that he's one of the greatest route runners I've ever seen in my life. He's very crisp, calculated, and the film doesn't lie. So if you don't believe me, go on YouTube and type in Chad Ochocinco route running, and trust me, you're not going to see a better route runner, more articulated, more attention to detail than Chad Ochocinco. He's got a very influential fan base. He's got a huge following, and I think this is great news for Chad Ochocinco, a guy who I really wanted to see get a second chance in the NFL. It's not through playing, but it's through coaching, and I think he deserves it. Obviously, the last time we saw Chad Ochocinco on the NFL field was training camp for the Miami Dolphins, and then he ended up getting cut during training camp because an incident where he allegedly headbutted his ex-wife, Evelyn, and I got my own opinions on that. I honestly think that, I think she did it. She's crazy. If you've seen Basketball Wives, you've seen what she's like. You see how scandalous she can be, in cases like that, with Chad Johnson being 6'2", her being like 5'7", things like that. A lot of times it's going to go against Chad Ochocinco. I hope he didn't do it. He came out and said he didn't do it and that she actually headbutted him, but you know what? In a situation like that, teams are still going to make their cuts, so I really wanted him to get a second chance to be able to play. I think he can still do it. Maybe this will open up the opportunity for him to come back and play. Maybe a team will see that. I think it's a good move for Chad Ochocinco. So stay tuned. Follow him on Twitter at Ochocinco. With guys like Chad Ochocinco, we look at guys like Ochocinco, Terrell Owens, guys who were very outspoken guys, controversial often at times, but that was entertaining. They're the equivalent to entertainment as Conor McGregor is entertaining to the UFC. They were that for the NFL. You never knew what celebration you'd see every week with Chad Johnson or Terrell Owens, the Hall of Fame jacket by Ochocinco, the popcorn by T.O. Was very exhilarating. And I think a lot of NFL teams last year who had some NFL wide receivers go down, I think they really could have benefited by giving some veterans like them a call. I mean, Reggie Wayne got cut by the Patriots in training camp, something I never really expected, but he is coming off that ACL tear. But guys like Ochocinco, Terrell Owens, I think they can still do something. It just goes to show, if they get an opportunity, I wonder if they can capitalize on it and take advantage of it. I do think that is a very big possibility in the future, and I think that coaching for Chad Ochocinco could be the avenue to get him back in the NFL at some point. We'll just have to see. At that point. So, it's good to see Ochocinco back. Glad to see his thing. Keep up with him on Twitter at Ochocinco. And let's talk about Draymond Green for a second, okay? So if you didn't notice, you didn't check TMZ or Fox News, whatever you look at for your source news, ESPN, whatever it may be, Snapchat. I saw it on Snapchat for some reason. It's unbelievable. But Draymond Green was arrested over the weekend in Michigan for allegedly backhanding Michigan State defensive back. I don't know his name, but, apparently it's just an alleged assault, so he was arrested. And Magic, he's had guys like Magic Johnson go out and tweet that he's innocent and that he did the right thing. You got Charles Barkley saying that he's glad that Draymond Green backhanded the Michigan State defensive back. So, you just got to wonder, okay, what's the give here? Why, obviously in that kind of behavior, backhanded somebody, he got arrested. But to have these guys come out and kind of condone that or say that he's innocent or that they're glad he did it is kind of unacceptable. It's kind of hypocritical of Charles Barkley, a guy who, on the field on the court was, kind of a bully, and let me rephrase some of Charles Barkley's comments over the last couple of weeks. I love Chuck to death, but he's the biggest hypocrite I've ever heard on national television outside of Skip Bayless, who's a joke. We'll talk about that as well. But Charles Barkley, who's had his related incidents to gambling, to incidents throwing people out of a window, to assaulting people, things like that, coming out and saying he's glad Draymond Green hit the guy. I don't know what happened. None of us really know the details besides the parties involved. But you can't come out and say that, because then that sends a message to all the other NBA players and athletes watching out that, okay, you know what, you do something stupid like that, you hit somebody, you're going to get, support from NFL legends like Magic Johnson. I think at this, they need to let the investigation pan out. Obviously, Draymond Green, you know what, it's really not hard for me at all to believe that Draymond Green could do something like this, because Draymond Green realistically is the type of guy who I could see backhanding somebody and hitting somebody. And the reason I say that is, well, let's look back at the playoffs. Let's look at how he performed in the playoffs for the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, the questionable kicks to Steven Adams in the groin, some just questionable, dirty play all around throughout the regular season. I find it really hard to believe that Draymond Green didn't do anything in this situation. I think he did, because he's that kind of antagonist as well. So, Draymond Green, I'm not buying it. I think he deserved to be fined in some way. Obviously, you're going to go through the court process. But, obviously, I'd like to see maybe a 5-game suspension to open up the NBA season. Guys can't get in trouble in the offseason. I tell you what, the offseason is the biggest killer of careers in the NFL, the NBA, and sports respectively. It is the most difficult time for these franchises, because they got players with a lot of money and a lot of downtime, and a lot of times a lot of the players aren't doing things that are necessarily good. They're doing things that could get them in a lot of bad headlines. You got the guys who do what they're supposed to, the honorable guys around the leagues, and then you got the guys who just can't seem to get away from the headlines, the cameras, the TMZ crews, things like that. And that's a difficult thing. That's a very difficult thing, because you got these guys acting out, getting in trouble, and then that reflects on the organization. So if I'm a general manager, I look at these guys and their behavior. For example, Draymond Green, based on just what he did in the playoffs, his questionable play, his dirty play that's been called into question over the last year. You look at that and you kind of like, okay, you know what? I do kind of find it hard to believe you're completely innocent based on what you do. You have no credibility in that area. So athletes need, I don't know, I think the NFL does a good job every year with the rookie symposium. Obviously, the one year they did something bad, having Chris Carter speak and say that they need to get a fall guy. The symposium's been a very positive experience outside of that incident right there, outside of that advice that Chris Carter gave. And it seems that a lot of rookies are doing a lot of good things now. You don't really see too many rookies now lately, or else I haven't seen in the last couple of years, rookies around the league in the NFL, NBA, things like that, getting in trouble with the law. So, maybe the symposium's is working, but a lot of these guys need counseling. A lot of these guys need help. They need advice. They need to bring in a team of financial advisors, guys who can manage their money, because athletes blow money. If you haven't seen ESPN 30 for 30 Going for Broke, go check it out now, because I'm telling you, it's going to open your eyes about what the world of sports is like. A lot of people confuse, okay, you get $3.5 million guaranteed, you got to factor in taxes. A lot of guys don't know about that aspect of the business model in the world of sports as well. So do some research, check it out on your own. But, like I said, athletes need to be held to a higher standard. One thing that really grinds my gears is the fact that, when something bad happens in the country, that people get on athletes for speaking about it. Carmelo Anthony did a great thing, in light of the Alton Sterling shooting and the injustice that we've seen in the last couple of weeks with African Americans being gunned down by police officers. Carmelo Anthony urged athletes to stand up and actually take a stand rather than talking about it on social media. You can tweet All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. You can tweet that change needs to happen, but what are you going to do? How are you going to make that happen? You have to actually unite, and you have to lock hands with other parties and fight for change. That's plain and simple. Plain and simple. We saw the game. We saw Snoop Dogg. They led a rally, a peaceful protest at LAPD headquarters this week in regards to the whole situations that have happened. And we've seen people unite over the Dallas police officers, the 4 guys, police officers that lost their lives due to the cowardice act of a shooter. Over the week is very sad, and the people who've been injured, over the protest. One thing I'm going to say, and I said this on Facebook, and I got a lot of great feedback from it. Black Lives Matter is not a terrorist organization. Black Lives Matter was intentionally, its original intent and purpose of creation was to stand up against the social injustice that African Americans face on a daily basis by cops, by employers, by people in general. And everyone always wants to throw out the statistic that, black on black crimes very high. Yes, it is. No one can argue with that. Everyone agrees with that. But Black Lives Matter does not mean, and was never intended to mean, that only Black lives matter and that white lives don't matter, cop lives don't matter. Black Lives Matter was a purpose, an organization created to shed light on the social injustice, the daily oppression that African Americans face, the unequal opportunity that they're given at life and at opportunity in the workplace every single day. It was created to stand up for that, saying that their lives do matter, that they deserve the same equal opportunity that a lot of other people get, that this guy gets, Asian guy, white guy, whatever. No, it doesn't matter about the color of skin, but in this instance, Black lives do matter. Okay, and people want to turn it into a terrorist organization because you have some people who infiltrate it and say that they're with Black Lives Matter, and then they carry out violent attacks on people. Those guys are not Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter activists, the guys who stand up for it and support BLM, are the people who are protesting peacefully, the people who are fighting for equal opportunity, fighting against oppression that the white man still possesses, the government still possesses towards African Americans. I'm a white man. I'm a Caucasian male, and I know this, and I see this every day. I've seen this happen to friends of mine that are African American. You know what? If the white guy can come out and say that, you know what, African Americans are getting an unequal opportunity in this world, you got to look at it. It's true. The unequal opportunity, they're going to look at one guy. A lot of times in my situations, I've experienced people in the workplace, people in life that are intimidated by a black person because of their skin color. And that's stereotyping, that's judgmental, and that's racist, that's racial profiling. And I've seen a lot of my friends, and I've had a lot of incidents where my friends have told me they've been stopped for no reason because of the color of their skin, and I believe it. America's got a huge issue right there. You got a lot of white supremacists infiltrating organizations like the police force, the FBI, things like that, the government. And the thing that I really don't like about this whole thing is that, with the recent events that have happened, the 2 innocent lives that were lost, people always want to resort to go into these people who lost their lives, like Alton Sterling. All I see are a lot of white people on social media posting about his criminal record, his past stuff that has nothing to do with why he got shot or his current situation. They're pulling up his felony records, they're pulling up his crime, his criminal records, and they're applying it, saying that justifies why police shot him. He was executed. He was murdered by those 2 policemen. And I don't like it. I don't like where our country's heading. I think our country's heading for a very dark state and a dark place. So, you know what? I'm just going to end it right there. I'm going to say this. Black lives do matter. If you have a problem with it, you need to look in the mirror and analyze it. Look up what the Black Lives Matter movement truly is. Educate yourself. Stop following what the media is trying to tell you. The media is just a sheep, leading a sheep to the slaughterhouse. Don't do it. They're trying to divide us all. Don't let the media divide you. Develop your own opinion. Do your own research. Educate yourself. That's all I'm going to say. We'll be back in just a quick moment. And when we return, I'm going to have Deshaunte Weber and Greg Lawson join me in studio to talk about the ADFL and the Grand Junction Gladiators in just a few moments when we return from a commercial break. You've been listening to the Coach's Corner podcast here on CodyRourke18.com. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at CodyRourkeNFL and enjoy the rest of your show. Deshaunte Weber, how's it going?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. It's been a crazy week. Obviously, we had to travel 6 long hours to Colorado Springs, unfortunately, but we made it, and it was a good trek up there to take on the Sabercats. How did you feel going up there?
I felt pretty good. We had talked about it during practice that week, that we just had to have that mentality that it didn't matter who we were playing, that we had to come out and just perform. And it seemed that we just performed in every foot on defense and special teams. We really just went out there and from the get-go just started off and really never looked back from the beginning of the game.
Absolutely. So, what was the message coaches were preaching throughout the week, traveling on the road, especially with a 1 o'clock game where you have to travel 6 hours, pretty much have to get up very, very early to make the trip. What did coaches preach to you, especially being an undefeated team going up against a team that was 3-3 and is already in the playoffs? How did that factor into the preparation mode for the Gladiators?
Yeah, it was really all week. It was just focus. We had to just really be on our grind and understand that, we had to get up about 4 or 5 in the morning and travel about 5 or 6 hours to a game. But when we got there, everybody arrived safely, and we just knew we had a game to play, and we got out there and really just finished, because that's just been really something that we've been trying to key on in second halves and stuff like that, is finishing. I feel like we really did that.
It was really hot when we got there to kick off. Obviously, sun ended up being a total of 105 degrees on the field. Pretty hot. But, from the opening beginning, obviously defense started off with the ball. Defending defense didn't start off the ball. Offense didn't have the ball yet, but, defense came out on the field, which is something that's been consistent this year for the Gladiators, obviously coming out and always deferring for the second half. So sometimes we always choose to receive in the second half. And it's kind of never gone as planned. Obviously, when we look back at the Cougars game and the Silverbacks game, opening kick taken back for a touchdown. However, there's a penalty that negates it. It kind of felt like maybe it was our bad luck charm to receive the ball in the second half. Maybe we should receive it first. But this game was much different. Defense held the ground first couple of plays. Obviously stopped the run with number 28. He's a very pretty elusive back. And then forced a 4th and 3 where they decided to try a fake punt, and they threw it right to you, pick 6. What was going through your head on that play? Obviously 4th and 3 when you saw that guy was rolling out with it. Obviously you were covering the gunner at that point. What indications did you have, and how did you make the play?
I mean, like you said, we all knew just kind of from the moment they snapped that ball that he was going to fake that punt. So he rolled out, and as I saw his eyes looking for one of his teammates coming across the middle running an in route, I just let the gunner run up there to my teammate Adam. Once I saw the guy throw it in the air, I pulled up highest point like we practice every day in practice, and picked up the ball, and I told myself at that moment that I was getting in the end zone no matter what. You really hadn't had your hands on the ball too much this year, over the courses you had over the previous years. Teams would always kept throwing to you, even though you kept picking it off. They really haven't thrown it your way much at all this year, and I think that just goes as a sign of respect for what kind of cornerback you are ever since coming in the league. This is your 4th year in the ADFL, 4th year with the Gladiators, and over those course of 4 years, you've had over 20 plus interceptions. That's something that's very unheard of, so, you also had a couple situations this year where you did touch the ball, but it didn't go for 6. You could have had pick 6s, but you dropped them. And then, I remember watching you, against which team was it? It was against the Metro State Roadrunners, where you broke on a curl route and you had it, but it just dropped. And, would have been gone for 6. So, obviously, I think every time our defense gets the ball in their hands, their goal is to score. And every time we've had the ball in our hands defensively this year, we've scored, and we've done a lot of great things with it. Obviously, I think our defense has put up a total of maybe 50 points this season, based on that and special teams alone. I think that's pretty accomplishing for a team like the Gladiators that can come out and do these kind of things. What's it like being out there on defense? Obviously, you, Adam Swanson, Greg Lawson in the defensive backfield have kind of been the veterans of that secondary over the last few years. What's it like out there having those guys over the top of you, especially in man-covered situations? Oh, man, honestly, it makes my life 10 times easier to know that I can count on 2 guys to be over the top for me, or basically just to do their job in general, even if they're not supposed to be on the top, just to know that I don't have to worry about any other guy on the field, and to know that as long as I do my job, those are the team guys are going to do their job, and we're pretty much going to win every single play. That's just good to know. Obviously, you forgot to mention on the other side we have Jesse Bradford over there, another veteran who actually he's one of the first guys I met on the team, and we knew each other for a couple years before I came to the team. So, he's really been a good friend and kind of just one of the guys I just know that has been here for a while and been there and done that type of thing. So he's been playing that role, and sometimes it may not always look the greatest for whoever may be in that kind of character role, but we've always had that person that's been willing to play it, and as you can see, it's benefited us tremendously.
You know, with that, obviously, speaking of Jesse Bradford, obviously this year's kind of been a year where, we haven't had him as much as we'd like to. Obviously, a lot of different life things have come up, but now that he's back out there on the field, opposite of you, I'm sure that just brings back the reignition of the whole mantra that we had as a tag 'em and bag 'em crew, the original defensive backfield out there, minus a couple guys that are retired or injured. Guys like that. It's really good to see, because obviously, you play with that level of swagger. And when you know that you got guys who are going to do their job, it makes it a lot easier for you to just play and ball out. So, with that, obviously, looking at the playoff picture, Gladiators clinched the number 1 seed this past weekend. Cougars clinched the number 2 seed. So both teams will have first round byes in the playoffs. You've got the Silverbacks and the Spades that they play this weekend, and they're going to battle. Whoever wins that game wins the number 3 seed in the playoffs, and will probably host a home game as well. It's pretty much looking like the loser of that will clinch the 4th seed, and then the SaberCats have the 5th seed locked down, and then the 6th seed comes down to a battle between the Mile High Punishers and the Metro State Roadrunners. 2 teams the Gladiators have already faced this year. Practically everybody in the playoffs the Gladiators have faced already, they've already beat them. As a player yourself, based on looking at the regular season, obviously Gladiators being undefeated, when you look at the teams that you've already played and you've already beaten in the regular season, you're probably going to play some of those teams twice in the playoffs, and maybe even if you make it to the first round, second round, even championship, you're going to be playing the teams you already played before. What is your mindset as a player, knowing that we played these guys, we beat them the first time? If we play them again, how do you prepare for that game without overlooking them because of the fact that you won the first result?
It's just like you said, it just goes back to preparation. We have to prepare like it's a whole new game, like we didn't play them before. Nothing's more harder in a game of football than beating the same team twice in a season. So we've already played, for example, if we played the Cougars again, we've already played them once. That was a very close game. We only beat them 30-27. So if we happen to play them again, we know they're going to come with a different mindset, which means we have to come with a different mindset. We have to know that we beat them once, but this isn't going to be a fluke. We have to go out there and prepare and fight the same way we did in that first game to get that W again, especially since it'll be in the playoffs, so it's win or go home.
Absolutely. With the Cougars and the Gladiators holding the best 2 seeds in the ADFL. Obviously, you mentioned back to the 30-27 victory Gladiators had over them earlier. It was a very tough game. It was 30-27 at one point. It was 30-17 with the Gladiators up with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Had a couple breakdowns towards late, and they ended up making it very interesting and scary. It looks like in the league right now between these two teams that these two teams right now are the teams to beat. They're they look unstoppable. The Cougars just knocked off the Silverbacks, who were previously undefeated until they played Grand Junction, and then they lost 25-6 to the Cougars as well. So, right now it's looking like both teams are ready, and they're gearing up for the postseason run. Obviously, Grand Junction has a game this weekend at Stoker Stadium, 6 p.m. against the Northern Colorado Technicians, a team that has yet to win a game this year. For a team like that coming in here, what is your preparation? What do you think is the most important thing about you as a player or a team, especially playing a team that has not a single win on the season, that hasn't really come up to perform at all this season? Is it easy? Can you overlook the kind of team like this, or is it a tune-up game for the Grand Junction Gladiators?
You definitely can't overlook them. As much as they want to win, we want to win as well. Of course, we want that undefeated season, and they don't want to go the whole season without losing a game. For them, it would look real nice on their record to just say that, unfortunately, they lost all their games except for one, and that one team that they beat would be the Grand Junction Gladiators. And so that would be a big feat for them, but at the same time, we can't take them lightly. Yes, they haven't won a game, but I really feel when they come over here, they're going to come over here really, really hungry. So we have to treat them like any other opponent.
Absolutely. So if I could ask you one question, if there's one receiver in this league that you could line up against in the playoffs, who would you want it to be the most? Who would you look forward to lining up against?
Anybody in this league?
Yes.
Haven't played played him this year, unfortunately, because he was hurt. So I definitely have to probably say James Greer. I mean, me and him, it goes back to my very first year. We've had a great battle every single time we step on the field. So unfortunately, when we played against the Punishers, he was just dealing with some past injuries, and so he couldn't play in that game. But I had seen him later in the season. We talked about it, and he's been getting back to playing. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see him in the playoffs or something, because I've always had a great competition. I guess they're like sportsman, great guy. Couldn't ask for more.
Absolutely. James Greer is a very tough guy, in my 4 years that I played in the ADFL, always going up against him and his cousin Travis has always been interesting. Those Greer boys are pretty athletic, very talented, and can give a lot of defenses troubles, and especially defensive backs. So, it just goes to show, based on this year and how the defensive backfield has played, performed, stepped up this year, even when guys have been hurt, guys have been out. We've had having a couple mental mistakes and always responding from it. Would you say that the defensive backfield for the Gladiators is the best in the league?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of other teams out there that have gone out there and just made the notion that they feel that they do have the best defense in the league and everything. But I really feel that with that name comes a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot of statistics and a lot of things that you have to represent in order to have that title. And I feel that as a defensive backfield and as a defensive defense as a whole, the purple rain of the Grand Junction Gladiators are definitely the defense in the league.
So on paper right now, currently in the ADFL, it says that the Gladiators have allowed a total of 53 points. However, after doing the math, the Gladiators defense itself only allowed a total of 39 points. The other 13 points coming off of a special teams score and an offensive fumble that was converted into a touchdown by the opposing team at that point. So really 39 points for the Gladiators defense allowed in a season is absolutely amazing. Right now it's currently sitting at the record. The record for the most defensive points allowed in a season by the Gladiators stood at 58, which was allowed back in 2012, the year the Gladiators won their first ever ADFL championship. So this week in the regular season, there's a lot on the line. There's more so than just an undefeated regular season, but a possibility of only holding a record amount of points, not allowing it. So that speaks a lot to itself with the Grand Junction Gladiators defense that's been around. It's been solid, it's been consistent, it's been loud every single year. I think a lot of things is a lot of these teams do a lot of talking, saying they're the best defense in the league, but come Saturdays, the Pats don't do the talking like the Gladiators do. And really with guys out there leading like Adam Swanson, yourself, Greg Lawson, Michael Bailey, and guys like that, obviously with the return of Ed Johnson looming near the playoffs, that's going to be pivotal for this defense even further. Also, Jesse Kerstetter, the inside linebacker spot. Realistically looking at it on paper, this defense, it looks phenomenal, but it really can't do it justice when you see it on Saturday, how great they perform each and every week. So, it's very exciting. Actually, I'm about to have Greg on the podcast as well. But, Deshaunte, I do believe that coming up here soon, obviously with playoffs coming, the focus got to kick up a little bit, or so we'll hit the film session. We'll do a lot of scouting and preparation for whatever team we decide to play in the playoffs. I'm looking forward to it. And also practice this week. So starting tomorrow and Thursday, we'll get after it. We'll install the game plan and get ready for this week.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to get back out there. One more game of the regular season, finish out strong. We know what we got to do. Get practice, get better. We want to be peaking here at the end of this week. We'll have a first round bye, which will be nice, but we'll definitely still practice and everything like that. And so that'll be for us to really start peaking at the perfect time.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you for joining me here tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Cody.
Deshaunte Weber joins me in studio. Thank you for being on the show, Deshaunte Weber. I'll see you tomorrow at practice. But, Deshaunte's a great player. I've had the privilege of playing alongside him the last 4 years. Last year I tore my ACL. But for a few years, him and I were the two of the top cornerbacks in the ADFL. Teams had a really hard time throwing on us. So, I was blessed to be able to play alongside a guy like him. One game they threw to his side 4 times, and 4 times he picked them off. He took 2 of those back for 6. And I've had plenty of experiences just like that with the Mile High Predators throwing my way. They learned the hard way. But he's a great player, great defensive back, leads the league in interceptions career-wise, him and Adam Swanson. So I'm blessed to have them in my defensive backfield. So currently on the line is my boy Greg Lawson. Greg Lawson joins me here on the Coach's Corner podcast today to talk about the ADFL. Deshaunte Weber joined me earlier to talk about it. So, Greg, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Just got off the phone with Deshaunte. Deshaunte was on the show. We were talking a lot about, kind of how the season's been going, what happened, against the SaberCats, the potential playoff seedings as well, and whatnot. So I just want to talk to you and reiterate a couple things. One thing I asked Deshaunte is obviously that, this season, we went through everybody, played everybody that's in the playoffs currently, and, Gladiators sitting at an undefeated record right now in the ADFL. Likelihood of us playing a team in the playoffs that we've already played is very, very likely. It's actually going to happen one way or the other. What is your mindset as a player, knowing that you already played a team in the regular season and beat them, but you may end up facing them in the postseason when it matters even more? What changes for you as a player going through that in your mind?
The changes going through my mind, man, is just to watch film the last time we played this team to see, what mistakes we had, what they, counted on us, what they capitalized and stuff on, and just fixing those mistakes because, I'm pretty sure when teams play each other in the regular season and play each other in the playoffs, the main game they watch is when we played each other in the regular season. So we got to see what we, did bad upon and, make it better for the playoffs. But simple little mistakes not going to, it's not going to cut it. And I'm pretty sure a team will be watching for our mistakes when they play us, and they're going to try to hit us on those mistakes and capitalize big time.
This is your 3rd year playing with the Grand Junction Gladiators. You come from playing college football at New Mexico Highlands University, and you coach locally at the high school level at Grand Junction High School alongside myself. With you obviously being football-minded, obviously this year you've taken much more of a leadership role, and guys look to your preparation, your level of focus, your intensity is unmatched. It's unbelievable. It's at a different level. Obviously with playoff time, the stakes get a lot bigger. Gladiators sitting at number 1 seed, clinched that. Cougars clinched the number 2 seed, and both teams that played earlier this season, obviously the Gladiators came out on top 30-27. The likelihood of those 2 teams, they're just rolling through right now and looking forward to a playoff run. However, you got the Spades sitting at the number 3 seed, alongside tied with the Silverbacks and currently for the number 3 seed. The winner of that game this week will lock up the 3 seed between the Silverbacks and the Spades. And then you got the SaberCats locked in at the 5th seed. So whoever loses the Spades and Silverbacks game will drop to the 4th seed. And then the winner of the Metro State and Mile High Punishers game will secure the number 6 seed. And those teams will play the following week in the first round of the playoffs, while the Cougars and the Gladiators have a bye week. If you could pick any team right now to play first in the playoffs, who do you think it would be? Who would you want it to be?
Man, I wanted to be honest. I would love to play the Silverbacks again because, they were, to be honest, even though, when we played them, we beat them like 28-6. They were a very competitive team, and, we, as a defense, being a safety, we had like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 defensive goal line stands, like on the 1 yard. All the quarterbacks have to do is take the ball and fall in. But, the best of luck was on the Gladiator side, and we came out with the win. So I would love to play those guys again because, it was, they was on the sniff in the end zone 6 times. But, we came out on top. So, number one team, number 1 defense, man. You've been in the red zone 6 times, man. You probably can play with us, but I'd like to see you again and see if you're really about that action.
The Silverbacks dropped to the Cougars this past weekend, score of 25-6. 2 weeks in a row where they could only score 6 points. At one point, they were putting up a lot of points, but at that point, when I looked at it, they were playing down. They're playing competition that really it was the lower tier competition. Their total opponents' win percentage at the time before we played them was only 16%. So when you factor in all those, as you mentioned, the Silverbacks were in the red zone on the goal line 5 or 6 times. One of those, you actually picked up a fumble and returned it 96 yards for a touchdown against them as well. That was a huge momentum thing. One thing I was talking with Deshaunte Weber about was the fact that the Gladiators defense this year, on paper, it says the defense has allowed 53 points. However, there's 13 points of that 53 that were given up on a special team score, and the offense fumbled that was recovered for a touchdown by the opposing team. So realistically, right now, the Gladiators have only allowed 39 total points this season, and 27 of those points came against the Colorado Cougars in the game where there was a couple late breakdowns late as well. So when you look at it, the Gladiators' record for most points allowed in the season is 58 total points, with 38 points. 39 points total allowed so far. You got the Northern Colorado Technicians coming in this weekend. The goal is for the Gladiators not to give up any points. Obviously, that's the goal for every defense. The winless Technicians come to take on the undefeated Gladiators this weekend. The goal is obviously to make sure that you set a new record, obviously, for points allowed in the season being 39. You want to leave it at that. That right there is pretty impressive. When you got an offense that scores almost 300 points in the season, we still have one more game to test it. However, but scoring close to 300 points a year and only allowing 39 points is unbelievable. That really goes to show how great the Gladiators defense has been. You get all these pretender teams every year saying they got the best defense, but when you put it on paper and you look at the stats, you look at the scores, the wins and losses, it goes to show who the real number one defense is in this league, and obviously the number one scoring offense this year, which Gladiators lead in both. Heading for the playoffs, what's one goal you want to see for the team in terms of execution? What's one of your goals for the Gladiators heading into the postseason, if you could have it go one way?
First and foremost, I can't forget about those Cougars, man. It was 30-27. I can't forget about that. But if I would like to play somebody first in the playoffs, I would love to play the Silverbacks. But on that note, man, we scored 62 points in one game, and there's been games where we didn't, put up triple the points against the opponent's stand. But to be honest, we haven't really played Gladiator football. Sound, hardcore, punch you in the mouth, run every play football game. We haven't played that yet. And we've been close to playing some, like if you look at the 62-0 game, and then a close game came through with the Cougars and whatnot. But man, we have to execute better. When we're on a goal line as an offense, we have to score. When we're on the goal, when we have opportunities to make plays as a defense, we have to catch the ball and make plays. If the ball touches the defensive player's hands, man, we have to score. We stop people from scoring. So, we have to score once we touch the ball. But if if we can score more points as a defense, in this playoff run, man, that would be amazing. That would be great. And, that's the number one thing I want for my team to do in the playoffs is just to execute more. Not even necessarily better, but just more. Because if we execute more, more points, more everything.
Absolutely. One thing I can look at, Greg, is you've been responsible for at least 21 points scoring-wise by the defense in and of itself. I remember 2 pick sixes in one game, and then obviously the fumble return for a touchdown against the Silverbacks. As you said, every time, we've had this conversation, you've told me that every time you touch the ball, you're going to score. That's your goal. I was giving Deshaunte Weber a hard time because I reminded him of the 2 times he had a pick in his hands that could have went for 6, and he dropped it. He was thinking about that Buffalo Wild Wings and the beer that I offered to get him, and it didn't really come through with them. So, you've done a good job at that. Obviously, I still got to owe you 2 more beers for those picks you had as well. I got 1 down, got to get more to go. So, try not to break my bank this week when the Technicians come to town.
Brother, trust and believe, man. If I get some more defensive touchdowns, I won't hold nothing against you, man. It's all just for the glory of God. I do it for God, and I want to go pro pretty soon. So that's, it's really not about the beer, but it's just for my team. It's for the Lord. It's for my family. At the end of the day, it's for myself. Because I want to go pro and everything. And if we can, all it's going to do is give me more opportunity to make plays, man. I make some more plays, go some more touchdowns. You probably could give me 1 more beer.
Absolutely. I love your heart and passion. Obviously, the motto is God, family, football, and that's something you uphold every day, man. So I appreciate you joining me here on the show. We're going to definitely get you back on this year.
Yeah, and I would love to do some more, man. This is fun. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me, Greg. Thank you.
Yep, you have a good
I want to thank Greg Lawson for taking his time to join me here today in the studio to talk about the ADFL. I've been very blessed to become friends with Greg Lawson over the last couple of years. I remember his first year as a Gladiator. It was my third year playing for the Gladiators. He came in with these dreads. He's super athletic, and I was like, dang, we got another deadly piece to add to this defense. So, you know what? I want to thank Greg. He's a great leader. I'm very blessed to have him in my defensive backfield, helping lead this team. His play speaks for itself. And so come check him out. Come check out Greg Lawson and the Gladiators this Saturday at Ralph Stoker Stadium, 6 o'clock p.m. kickoff against the Northern Colorado Technicians, who come in with a winless record, taking on the undefeated Gladiators, who hope to aim the regular season with an undefeated streak leading into the postseason, and also to obtain the record of least points allowed in a season. The Grand Junction Gladiators hope to make that record. Only 39 points allowed by its defense. Previously, the record was 58. So this would be a new record in the ADFL and for the Grand Junction Gladiators if they uphold this weekend against the winless Technicians when they come to town. So I want to thank every single person who's contributed to the show tonight, who's helped out in many, many ways. To the listeners all across the world on iHeartRadio, CodyWork18.com. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter and tweet me. If you want to be on the show, let me know. Tweet me your thoughts, analysis, what you want to talk about on the show. We'll get you on here, and it'll be a great show. So thank you very much.
Now what the hell are you waiting for? After me, there should be no rules. So for one last time, nigga, make some noise.